Rebecca Northwood's fingers trembled as she stared at the eviction notice tacked to her front door, the crisp February wind of 1885 biting through her threadbare shawl. At 42 years old, with silver threads woven through her once vibrant auburn hair, she had just lost everything: her husband of 20 years to pneumonia, their modest home in Philadelphia to debts, and now, it seemed, her dignity. Mrs. Northwood, a woman your age really ought to consider the poorhouse, Mrs. Blackwell, her late husband's cousin, had told her that morning with false sympathy dripping from each word. Starting over, at your age, my dear, that's for the young. The West is no place for a widow in her declining years. Rebecca crumpled the notice in her fist, anger replacing the hollow ache in her chest. 10 days. She had 10 days to vacate the only home she'd known since marrying Edward. Her gaze fell on the newspaper folded on her kitchen table, open to an advertisement she'd been studying for days. Teachers needed in Wyoming Territory. New settlement seeks educated individuals. She had been a teacher before her marriage, good enough that parents had sought her out specifically for their children. Edward had insisted she give it up, saying no wife of his would work outside the home. Now she had nothing but the teaching credentials tucked away in a box of memories, and a desperate need to prove Mrs. Blackwell wrong. Rebecca smoothed the crumpled eviction notice against her skirt. "I am not too old," she whispered, her resolve hardening with each word. "I am not too old." 3 weeks later, Rebecca stepped off the train in Jackson, Wyoming, her entire life packed in 2 modest trunks. The journey had consumed nearly all her remaining funds, leaving her with precious little to start her new life. The platform was busier than she had expected, filled with men in various states of ruggedness, and a few women who looked as travel-worn as she felt. The small frontier town sprawled before her, nestled at the base of majestic mountains that dwarfed any landscape she had ever seen. Log buildings and a few painted storefronts lined what appeared to be the main street, while horses stood hitched at posts, stamping occasionally against the early spring chill. Mrs. Northwood. A thin man with spectacles approached her, consulting a list in his hand. "Rebecca Northwood from Philadelphia, the new teacher." "Yes, that's correct." Rebecca straightened her posture, attempting to look more confident than she felt. "Walter Jenkins, town clerk." He extended a hand. "We received your wire. The school board is pleased you accepted the position. However," he glanced at his notes again, frowning slightly, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding about the accommodations." Rebecca's stomach tightened. "Misunderstanding? The previous arrangement for teacher housing is no longer available. The building was damaged in a storm last week. We're working to secure alternative lodging, but it may be a few days." Rebecca fought to keep her expression neutral. "I see. Is there an inn where I might stay in the meantime?" "The hotel is full with the cattle buyers in town for the spring sales." Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. "We can offer you temporary quarters above the Mercantile, but it's quite rustic, just until proper arrangements can be made." "That will be fine," Rebecca said with more certainty than she felt. She had come too far to falter at the first obstacle. Jenkins nodded and waved over a young boy to help with her trunks. As they made their way down the muddy street, Rebecca caught snippets of conversation from passers-by, talk of cattle prices, weather, and the school. A woman roughly her own age gave her an appraising look before whispering to her companion. Rebecca lifted her chin higher, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. The Mercantile was larger than she had anticipated, with a wide porch and glass windows displaying an array of goods. Inside, shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with everything from food staples to tools, fabric to ammunition. The rich scents of coffee, leather, and tobacco mingled in the air. "Mr. Parsons," Jenkins called out, "the new school teacher is here." From behind a counter emerged a tall man with broad shoulders and a weather-beaten face. Tate Paxton removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the temples. Deep lines framed eyes the color of a summer sky, and a well-trimmed beard covered his jaw. He couldn't be much older than Rebecca herself, perhaps mid-40s, but the frontier had clearly left its mark on him. "Madam," he greeted, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "Welcome to Jackson." "Thank you," Rebecca replied, suddenly very aware of her travel-stained clothing and disheveled appearance. "Mr. Paxton owns the mercantile," Jenkins explained. "He's kindly offered the spare room upstairs until we sort out your permanent housing." Rebecca looked between the two men, uncertain of the propriety of such an arrangement. "That's very generous, but my sister lives with me," Tate said, seeming to read her concern. "Martha will be pleased to have female company. The room has its own entrance from the back stairs." Relief washed over Rebecca. "Then I'm grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Paxton." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Folks just call me Tate." Jenkins excused himself, promising to return in the morning to show Rebecca to the schoolhouse. Tate called for his sister, who appeared from a back room. Martha Paxton was a sturdy woman with the same blue eyes as her brother and a no-nonsense expression that softened when introduced to Rebecca. "Finally, another woman with some sense about her," Martha declared after a brief assessment. "The girls in this town are either too young or too foolish. Come along, let's get you settled." The room above the store was indeed rustic, a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table with a single chair, and a window overlooking the mountains to the west. But it was clean, with fresh linens and a vase of early spring wildflowers on the table. "It's not much," Martha apologized, "but it's warm and private." "It's perfect," Rebecca said, meaning it. After weeks of uncertainty, even this simple room represented security. "Supper's at 6, Martha informed her. "Tate's a fair cook when I let him near the stove. Rest a bit first, you look done in." When Martha left, Rebecca sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of her journey. She had done it, traveled halfway across the country to start anew. But as she gazed around the sparsely furnished room, Mrs. Blackwell's words echoed in her mind. "Too old to start over," Rebecca whispered, her fingers working at the pins in her hair. "We shall see about that." Supper was a simple affair of venison stew, freshly baked bread, and apple preserves. Tate said little, but Rebecca noticed how attentively he listened as she explained her journey and previous teaching experience. Martha kept the conversation flowing with tales of the town and its inhabitants, painting a picture of a community struggling to establish itself amid the harsh realities of frontier life. "The school's been without a proper teacher for 6 months, Martha explained. "We've had various folks filling in the minister's wife, myself for a spell, even Tate taught arithmetic for a few weeks." Tate looked up from his plate. "Numbers make sense. People are harder. Children just need patience and structure," Rebecca said, "and someone who believes in their potential." "How many pupils will I have?" 23 at last count, Martha replied. "Ages 6 to 16. Some only come when they can be spared from ranch work or household duties. The ranchers value education," Tate added, "even if they don't always show it by regular attendance. Winter's the fullest classroom, summer you might have just a handful." "What about books and supplies?" Rebecca asked, already mentally organizing her approach. "The town council allotted funds for basics. Not enough, but it's something," Martha said. "Tate's been gathering donations of books." Tate shrugged when Rebecca looked at him questioningly. "Everyone should know how to read. Opens up the world." After supper, despite Martha's protests that she should rest, Rebecca insisted on helping with the dishes. The domestic ritual felt grounding after so many days of travel and upheaval. Through the kitchen window, she could see the last light of day painting the distant mountains gold. "It's beautiful here," she murmured. "Different from Philadelphia, I expect," Tate said, coming to stand beside her with a dish towel in hand. "In every possible way." Rebecca passed him a clean plate. "But I think I might come to love it." "Most do if they stay long enough." He dried the plate methodically. "Some can't handle the winters or the isolation. Others find what they're looking for." "And what about you, Mr. Paxton? Did you find what you were looking for?" His eyes met hers briefly. "Still looking, madam, but I've found enough to keep me here." The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn, a lifetime habit that even exhaustion couldn't break. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, navy blue with white piping at the collar and cuffs, and twisted her hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Today, she would meet her students and begin building the new life she had risked everything for. She was surprised to find Tate already in the store's back room, stoking the stove and preparing coffee. He nodded a greeting, pouring her a cup without asking. "Early riser," he commented, sliding the mug across the table. "Always have been." She wrapped her fingers around the warm pottery. "Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky lightened outside. Rebecca found herself studying his hands, large, work roughened, but surprisingly dexterous as he sliced bread for toasting. "May I ask how long you've been in Jackson?" she inquired. 8 years. He placed the toast on a plate between them. "Came with Martha after the war. Wanted open space after too many years of trenches and battlefields. You fought for the Union," he nodded. "Pennsylvania, 83rd. Saw more than I care to remember." Rebecca understood his reticence. Edward had been too young for the war, but her brothers had fought. One had never really recovered from what he'd witnessed. "The school bell rings at 8, Tate said, changing the subject. "Jenkins is always late, so I'll walk you over if you'd like." The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a sturdy log structure with a small bell tower. Inside, 24 desks of varying sizes faced a larger desk and chalkboard. Shelves lined one wall, sparsely populated with books. A pot-bellied stove dominated the center of the room, already lit and warming the space. "I took the liberty," Tate explained, gesturing to the stove. "Gets cold in here otherwise." "Thank you." Rebecca moved through the room, assessing what she had to work with. It was basic but serviceable, better than some city schools she had seen. A stack of books sat on her desk with a note. "From my personal collection. Return them when the school has better. TP." Rebecca leafed through them, a geography text, several readers of different levels, a mathematics primer, and a well-worn copy of Shakespeare's collected works. "These are excellent," she said, touched by the gesture. Tate shifted, looking almost embarrassed. "Not much call for Shakespeare in the Mercantile. Figured they'd do more good here." The first students began arriving shortly after, eyeing Rebecca with undisguised curiosity. They ranged from tiny first years clutching slate boards to gangly teenagers trying to appear uninterested. Parents accompanied the younger ones, introducing themselves and sizing up the new teacher. "Mrs. Northwood comes highly recommended," Tate told a skeptical-looking rancher. "Taught for years back east." The man nodded grudgingly. "My boy needs to cipher better if he's going to take over the ranch someday. His mother's been teaching him, but she's got the other little ones now." "I'll ensure he receives thorough instruction in mathematics," Rebecca promised. By 8 o'clock, the classroom was full. Tate tipped his hat to Rebecca and slipped out, leaving her to face 23 pairs of expectant eyes. She took a deep breath and stepped to the front of the room. "Good morning. I am Mrs. Northwood, and I will be your teacher," Before we begin with lessons, I would like to learn your names and something about each of you." The morning progressed better than she had dared hope. The students, while ranging widely in abilities and preparation, were generally respectful and eager to impress the new teacher. By noon, when she rang the bell for the midday break, Rebecca had already begun formulating plans for organizing the diverse group into manageable learning cohorts. She was making notes at her desk when a shadow fell across the paper. Looking up, she found Tate standing in the doorway, a cloth-wrapped bundle in his hands. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, stepping inside. "Martha sent lunch." "That's very kind, but she needn't trouble herself." "No trouble. She worries about people not eating properly." He set the bundle on her desk and unwrapped it, revealing 2 sandwiches, an apple, and a jar of cool tea. "Will you join me?" Rebecca asked impulsively. Tate hesitated, then pulled up a student's chair. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "How are they?" "The students, bright, eager. Some are behind where they should be for their ages, but that's to be expected with inconsistent teaching. Town's growing fast, more families settling every month. I noticed several students mention being new to the area." Tate nodded. "Railroads bringing changes, for better and worse." "Change is inevitable," Rebecca said, thinking of her own circumstances. "Doesn't mean it's always welcome." Tate studied her. "What made you choose Wyoming, Mrs. Northwood, long way from Philadelphia?" Rebecca hesitated. She wasn't ready to share the humiliation of her circumstances, the crushing words of those who believed her life effectively over at 42. "I wanted a fresh start," she said simply. "After my husband died, there seemed little reason to remain. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." "It's been nearly a year now." The school bell outside rang, signaling the end of the lunch break. Tate stood, gathering the lunch wrappings. "I'll tell Martha you enjoyed the lunch," he said, moving toward the door. "Mr. Paxton," Rebecca called after him. When he turned, she added, "Thank you for everything." A small smile touched his lips. "Welcome to Jackson, Mrs. Northwood." The days settled into a rhythm. Rebecca taught from 8 until 4, gradually reorganizing the curriculum to accommodate her students' varying needs. The older boys attended sporadically as ranch work demanded, but she created independent study plans they could follow at home. The younger children came more regularly, and their progress was swift under consistent guidance. True to Jenkins' word, the town council secured proper accommodations for Rebecca after a week, a small cottage near the church that had previously housed the minister's mother-in-law. It was modest but comfortable, with a kitchen, sitting room, bedroom, and even a small study where she could prepare lessons. Martha helped her settle in, bringing curtains and a patchwork quilt to make the space more homey. Tate delivered a bookshelf he had built in odd hours, installing it in the study without fanfare. "Just seemed like a teacher ought to have proper shelves," he said when Rebecca tried to thank him. Spring advanced into summer, bringing longer days and an explosion of wildflowers across the valley. The school attendance dwindled as predicted, but Rebecca used the time to work intensively with the students who remained and to prepare more comprehensive lessons for the fall term. She found herself adapting to frontier life more easily than she had expected. The community, while initially reserved with the newcomer, gradually accepted her as they saw her dedication to their children's education. She was invited to Sunday dinners, included in quilting circles, and consulted on matters requiring a literate hand or an educated opinion. Tate remained a steady presence in her life. Though no longer her landlord, he made a point of stopping by the school regularly, sometimes bringing supplies for the students, other times just to inquire about her well-being. Rebecca found herself looking forward to these visits, appreciating his quiet strength and understated kindness. One Saturday in late June, Rebecca was in the mercantile selecting fabric for new curtains when Martha approached her. "Tate's taking me fishing at the creek tomorrow after church," she said. "Says I need fresh air. You should join us." Rebecca hesitated. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your family time." Martha snorted. "Family time? Tate will fish, I'll read, and we'll both pretend we're not avoiding the church social afterward. You'd be doing me a favor having another woman to talk to." Put that way, Rebecca could hardly refuse. The next day she joined them at the small creek that ran along the eastern edge of town. Tate had brought a picnic basket and fishing gear, setting up a comfortable spot under a cottonwood tree before wading into the water with his rod. Martha, true to her word, immediately opened a novel and settled against the tree trunk. Rebecca spread her skirts on the blanket Tate had laid out, enjoying the novelty of having nowhere to be and nothing pressing to accomplish. "He's different when you're around," Martha said suddenly, peering over the top of her book. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. He talks more, smiles more." Martha turned a page. "Hasn't done that in years. Your brother has been very kind to me, but I assure you—" "Oh, I'm not matchmaking," Martha interrupted, though the glint in her eye suggested otherwise. "Just making an observation. Tate deserves some happiness. So do you, I expect." Before Rebecca could formulate a response, Tate returned to the bank, holding up 2 gleaming trout. "Dinner," he announced. "You clean them, I'll cook them," Martha replied, setting aside her book. "Rebecca, has my brother shown you the view from Miller's Ridge? You can see all the way to the Tettons on a clear day like this." "I haven't had the pleasure," Rebecca replied. "It's just up that trail." Martha pointed to a path leading up the hillside. "Not too steep. Tate can show you while I prepare these fish." Tate shot his sister a look that Rebecca couldn't quite interpret. "Mrs. Northwood might prefer to rest." "Actually, I'd love to see it," Rebecca said, "if you don't mind showing me." The path was indeed moderate, though Rebecca was grateful for Tate's steadying hand on the occasional steeper sections. They walked in comfortable silence, the sounds of the forest surrounding them birdsong, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of the creek. At the top of the ridge, Rebecca gasped. The view was spectacular. The valley spread below them, the town a collection of toy-like buildings, and beyond, the magnificent Teton Range still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "It's breathtaking," she said softly. "Worth the climb?" Tate asked, standing beside her. "Absolutely." They stood in silence for a long moment, absorbing the vastness of the landscape. Rebecca felt something shift inside her, a sense of belonging she hadn't expected to find so far from everything familiar. "May I ask you something personal, Mrs. Northwood?" Tate's voice broke the silence. "Of course. What really brought you to Jackson? Teaching positions are available closer to civilization." Rebecca considered deflecting again, but found herself wanting to share the truth with this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. "After Edward died, I discovered we were deeply in debt. The house, our savings, everything was gone." She kept her eyes on the distant mountains. "I had to find work, but in Philadelphia, the only positions offered to a widow my age were as a housekeeper or companion. When I inquired about teaching again, I was told I was too old to start over, that younger women were preferred." She turned to face him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. "The advertisement for Jackson mentioned only qualifications, not age. It was the farthest position I could afford to reach with what little money remained. You left everything you knew because some fool told you you were too old." "Because I refused to believe them," she corrected, "and because I had nothing left to lose." Tate nodded slowly. "Brave decision." "Desperate one," Rebecca admitted, "but I haven't regretted it, not once. And now, Do you plan to stay in Jackson, or is this just a stopping point until something better comes along? The question caught her off guard. I hadn't thought beyond the year's teaching contract. Do you think the town will want me to continue? Tate's lips curved in a rare, full smile. The town council is already drafting a letter requesting you sign on permanently. The children are learning more than they ever have, and their parents notice. Then I suppose I will stay, Rebecca said, surprised by how right the decision felt. Jackson feels more like home than Philadelphia did, even after just a few months. I'm glad to hear it. Tate's voice had softened. He seemed about to say more when a shout from below interrupted them. Fish are ready, Martha called up the hill. Come eat before they get cold. As they made their way back down, Tate offered his hand again on the steeper portions of the trail. This time, Rebecca was acutely aware of the warmth of his palm against hers, the strength in his fingers as they guided her safely down the path. Summer stretched into fall, bringing cooler temperatures and the return of students to the schoolhouse. Rebecca found herself fully immersed in the rhythms of Jackson, no longer feeling like an outsider but a valued member of the community. Her cottage became a gathering place for student study sessions and occasional meetings of the newly formed Ladies' Literary Society. Tate remained a steadfast presence, though their interactions were often brief, a conversation after church, a few words exchanged at the mercantile, the occasional Sunday dinner at his and Martha's home above the store. Rebecca found herself looking forward to these moments more than she cared to admit, even to herself. In late October, the first snow dusted the mountains, a harbinger of the harsh winter to come. Rebecca had heard stories of Wyoming winters, but had yet to experience one firsthand. At Martha's insistence, she allowed Tate to inspect her cottage, making necessary repairs to ensure it would withstand the coming cold. Chimneys sound, he reported after checking the roof. But these windows need better sealing. I'll bring caulking tomorrow. I appreciate your help, Rebecca said, pouring him a cup of coffee. Everyone tells me I don't know what I'm in for with the winter. It can be brutal, he acknowledged, accepting the cup, but there's beauty in it too. The way the snow blankets everything, the clarity of the stars on cold nights. You sound almost poetic, Mr. Paxton. A faint color touched his cheeks, just practical observation. Of course, Rebecca smiled. Martha mentioned you're quite well read. I've noticed your contributions to the school library show a discerning taste. Had a teacher once who encouraged reading, said books were windows to worlds we might never see otherwise. He sipped his coffee. During the war, books kept me sane. After, they helped me understand what I'd been through. It was the most he had ever shared about his wartime experiences. Rebecca recognized the significance of the confidence. Books have been my constant companions as well, she said, especially this past year. Their eyes met over the coffee cups, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then Tate set his cup down and rose. I should finish checking those windows before dark. That night, the first major snowstorm of the season descended on Jackson. Rebecca woke to find her world transformed, snow piled against her windows, the path to town obscured under a pristine white blanket. The temperature had plummeted overnight, and despite the fire she had banked before bed, the cottage was bitterly cold. She dressed quickly in her warmest clothes and attempted to rebuild the fire, but the wood she had inside was running low. The main pile was stacked against the rear wall of the cottage, now accessible only through thigh-deep snow. After a hasty breakfast, Rebecca bundled into her heaviest coat inadequate for Wyoming winters. She now realized and opened her front door. The snow reached midway up her calves, and the wind cut through her clothing like knives. She had managed only a few steps toward the woodpile when a familiar figure trudged up her path. Tate, his shoulders dusted with snow, carried an armload of split logs. "Thought you might need these," he called over the wind. Relief flooded through her. "You're a godsend, Mr. Paxton." Inside, he stacked the wood neatly beside the stove while Rebecca heated water for coffee. "School's canceled today," he informed her. "Too dangerous for the children who live outside town to travel in." I suspected as much. Rebecca wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, still shivering despite the fire's renewed warmth. "I clearly underestimated Wyoming weather." Tate eyed her thin coat hanging by the door. "That won't do for winter here. You need something lined with proper insulation." "I'll order something suitable," she promised, though mentally calculating the cost against her modest teacher's salary. Tate seemed to read her thoughts. "Martha has a spare coat that might fit you. She's been meaning to bring it over. And there's a shipment of winter goods arriving next week at the store. I can set aside a few necessities for you." "Thank you. I'll pay for them when my next wages come." He waved away her concern. "We can settle accounts later. More important that you don't freeze in the meantime." As he turned to leave, Rebecca impulsively caught his arm. "Mr. Paxton Tate, why are you always so kind to me?" He looked startled by the question, then thoughtful. "Everyone deserves kindness, Mrs. Northwood." "Rebecca," she corrected softly. "If I'm to call you Tate, you should use my given name." "Rebecca," he repeated, the sound of her name in his deep voice sending an unexpected warmth through her. "To answer your question, you remind me that courage comes in many forms. Moving across the country alone, starting fresh when others said you couldn't. That takes a special kind of bravery." Before she could respond, he added, "I'll bring more wood this evening. Keep your fire stoked." The storm raged for 3 days, effectively closing the school for the week. True to his word, Tate appeared twice daily, bringing wood, supplies, and news from town. On the third evening, he arrived with Martha in tow, both of them laden with packages. "We're having an impromptu sewing circle," Martha announced, bustling into the cottage. "You need proper winter clothes, and sitting alone during a blizzard is the quickest path to melancholy." She unpacked her bundles, revealing lengths of thick wool, fur trimming, and a pattern for a heavy coat. "Tate says you're about my size, but slimmer through the shoulders. We can alter my spare coat for immediate use and make you a proper one for the deep winter." The evening that followed was among the most pleasant Rebecca had experienced since coming to Wyoming. Martha's practical efficiency complemented her own more methodical approach to sewing, while Tate occupied himself with small repairs around the cottage that Rebecca hadn't even noticed needed attention. They shared a simple supper of stew that Martha had brought, and as the wind howled outside, the cottage felt warmer than it ever had, not just from the well-stoked fire, but from the companionship. "You should stay in town through winter," Martha said as they worked. "This cottage is too isolated when the snow really piles up. The room above the store is still available." "I couldn't impose again," Rebecca protested. "Nonsense. We'd welcome the company, wouldn't we, Tate?" Tate looked up from where he was fixing a loose floorboard. "The offer stands if you need it." Rebecca found herself considering the idea more seriously than she might have expected. "I'll keep it in mind, thank you, though I hope I won't need to abandon my home entirely." "Just know you have options," Martha said firmly. No one should face their first Wyoming winter alone. When the storm finally broke, the town emerged from hibernation into a crystalline world. The school reopened, though attendance was sparse as outlying families remained snowbound. Rebecca had just dismissed her 7 present students when the door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Tate Paxton. "Lesson plans?" he asked, nodding toward the papers spread across her desk. Attempting to create meaningful work for students who may only attend sporadically through winter, she explained. It's challenging to maintain progress with such inconsistent attendance. You could assign take-home work for the ranch children, Tate suggested. I make deliveries to most of the outlying properties. Could drop off and collect assignments. Rebecca brightened. That's an excellent idea. Would you really be willing to serve as courier? Happy to help. Education's important. She began gathering materials. I'll prepare packets immediately. This could make a significant difference for the older students especially. As she organized books and papers, Tate cleared his throat. There's a town social on Saturday, holiday celebration before Christmas. Yes, Martha mentioned it. I've been helping some of the children prepare recitations. I was wondering if you might. He paused, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. That is, would you consider attending with me, as my guest? Rebecca's hand stilled over the papers. She looked up to find Tate watching her intently, his usually impassive face revealing a hint of vulnerability. I would be honored, she said softly. A smile transformed his features. I'll call for you at 6 then. After he left, Rebecca sat at her desk long after she should have departed for home, her mind whirling with unexpected emotions. It had been years since she'd felt the flutter of anticipation that now filled her chest, not since the early days of courtship with Edward. For the first time, thinking of her late husband didn't bring the sharp pang of loss, but rather a gentle acknowledgement of a chapter completed. She had loved him, despite his faults and the financial disaster he had left her with. But that life was behind her now. Here in Jackson, against all odds, she had found not just survival but the possibility of joy. The realization both startled and delighted her. At 42, when others had written her off as finished, she was discovering that life still held promise. The social was held in the town hall, decorated festively with pine boughs and red ribbons. Rebecca wore her best dress, dark green wool with lace at the collar, freshly altered with Martha's help to better suit current styles. Her hair, with more silver strands than she cared to admit, was arranged in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. Tate arrived precisely at 6, looking transformed from his usual practical attire. His suit, though not new, was well tailored to his broad shoulders, and he had trimmed his beard neatly. He held his hat in his hands, an uncharacteristic gesture of nervousness. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she opened the door. Rebecca felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." Martha had elected to arrive separately, giving them a conspiratorial wink as she departed ahead of them. The walk to the town hall was brief but magical, the path illuminated by the full moon reflecting off snow, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The social was already in full swing when they arrived. A small ensemble played lively tunes in one corner while townspeople danced, conversed, and enjoyed refreshments. Rebecca's students rushed to greet her, proudly showing off their holiday finery and reminding her of their upcoming recitations. "Mrs. Northwood has certainly made an impression," observed Clara Watson, the banker's wife, as she joined Tate near the refreshment table. "The children adore her." "She's a fine teacher," Tate replied. "The town's fortunate to have her." "Indeed." Mrs. Watson's gaze moved between them speculatively. "And it seems the teacher has made quite an impression on our local merchant as well." Tate didn't deny it. "Mrs. Northwood is an exceptional woman." "She is," Mrs. Watson agreed, "though I confess I had my doubts when the council hired her, a widow her age from back east. I wasn't sure she'd adapt, but she's proven me wrong at every turn. People are often underestimated based on arbitrary factors," Tate said, a protective edge entering his voice. Age being one of the most foolish, Mrs. Watson smiled. Quite right, Mr. Paxton, quite right. The evening progressed with the children's recitations, poems, and short readings they had practiced under Rebecca's guidance. She watched proudly as even the shyest students performed with confidence, their parents beaming with approval. After the performances, the music resumed and Tate turned to Rebecca. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked, gesturing toward the dancing couples. "I haven't danced in years," she confessed. "Neither have I," he admitted. "We can remember together." His hand was warm and steady at her waist as he guided her through a simple waltz. They moved somewhat stiffly at first, but soon found their rhythm, turning gracefully among the other couples. Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she had felt so light, so alive. "I never thanked you properly," she said as they danced. "For what? For believing in me when I arrived. For your help and kindness these past months." Tate's blue eyes held hers steadily. "You never needed anyone to believe in you, Rebecca. You believed in yourself enough to cross a continent and build a new life. That kind of courage is rare. Nevertheless, your friendship has meant a great deal to me." "Is that what this is?" he asked softly. "Friendship." Rebecca felt her heart quicken. "What would you call it?" Before he could answer, the music ended, and Reverend Collins called for everyone's attention to announce the Christmas charity collection. The moment passed, but the question lingered between them as the evening continued. Walking home under the starlit sky, Rebecca was acutely aware of Tate beside her, his arm occasionally brushing hers as they navigated the snowy path. At her door, he hesitated. "I enjoyed this evening very much," she said, filling the silence. "As did I." He seemed to be struggling with words, unusual for a man typically so direct. "Rebecca, I find myself thinking of you often, more than might be considered proper for mere friendship." Rebecca's breath caught. "I think of you as well. I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures," he continued. "The war took whatever poetry I might have had, but I know what I feel and it's stronger than anything I've felt before." "Tate, you don't need to respond now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that if you're interested, if you might consider that is, I believe we could build something meaningful together." In the moonlight, his face showed a vulnerability that touched her deeply. This strong, steady man who had faced war and wilderness was nervous about expressing his feelings to her. "I would very much like to explore what might grow between us," she said softly. Relief and joy transformed his features. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but conveyed a wealth of emotion, tenderness, respect, and the promise of deeper feelings. "Good night, Rebecca," he whispered as he drew back. "Good night, Tate." Inside her cottage, Rebecca pressed her fingers to her lips, smiling in the darkness. At 42, when she had been told her life was effectively over, she had found not just a new beginning but the possibility of love. Winter tightened its grip on Jackson as Christmas approached. The school closed for a 2-week holiday, though Rebecca continued to prepare materials for the students' return and made herself available to those who wanted additional learning opportunities during the break. Tate called on her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, a jar of honey from a local beekeeper, once even a delicate silver hairpin he'd ordered from Denver. They spoke openly about their growing feelings, taking time to learn each other's stories, dreams, and sorrows. On Christmas Eve, he invited her to dinner at his and Martha's home. The apartment above the Mercantile was transformed, pine boughs decorated every surface, candles glowed in the windows, and savory aromas filled the air. "Martha's outdone herself," Rebecca commented as Tate took her coat. "Actually, I did most of the cooking," he admitted. Martha's visiting friends until later. The significance wasn't lost on Rebecca. This was the first time they would be truly alone together, without the buffer of students, customers, or his sister. Dinner was simple but delicious: roast venison, winter vegetables from the root cellar, freshly baked bread, and a spice cake for dessert. Tate had set the table with care, using what she suspected were rarely deployed fine dishes. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "I had no idea you were such an accomplished cook. Army taught me basics. Rest came from necessity after Martha had influenza a few years back." He filled her wine glass. "Been practicing this meal for a week. Martha nearly banned me from the kitchen." Rebecca laughed. "Your dedication is impressive." After dinner, they moved to the small sitting area where a fire crackled cheerfully in the grate. Tate hesitated, then reached for something on the mantelpiece, a small wrapped package. "It's not much," he said, handing it to her. "But I wanted you to have something special for Christmas." The wrapping revealed a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate wildflower designs. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a gold locket on a delicate chain. "Tate," she breathed. "It's exquisite." "Open it," he urged. Inside the locket was a tiny, perfectly preserved mountain wildflower, the first bloom of spring, pressed and protected under glass. "It reminded me of you," he said quietly. "Strong enough to push through snow, beautiful despite harsh conditions. First sign of new beginnings." Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." She reached into her own bag and withdrew a package. "My gift seems inadequate in comparison." Tate unwrapped it carefully to reveal a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool and a small leather-bound journal. "The scarf to keep you warm on your delivery routes," she explained. "And the journal. You once mentioned that writing helped you make sense of difficult experiences. I thought perhaps you might want to write about happier times as well." He ran his fingers over the soft wool, then the smooth leather cover. "No one's given me something so personal in years. Thank you." They sat together before the fire, talking softly as the snow fell outside. Tate spoke more openly than ever before about his war experiences, the horrors he had witnessed, the comrades lost, the long journey back to himself afterward. "Didn't think I'd ever feel whole again," he admitted. "Coming west helped, building something here, but there was still something missing." "And now?" Rebecca asked. "Now I'm beginning to believe in possibilities again." His eyes met hers. "Because of you." When Martha returned later that evening, she found them still by the fire, Rebecca's head resting comfortably on Tate's shoulder, their hands intertwined. She smiled knowingly, but said nothing, simply adding another log to the fire before discreetly retiring to her room. As January gave way to February, Rebecca and Tate's courtship became the subject of gentle town gossip. Most viewed the development with approval: the respected schoolteacher and the steady merchant made a sensible match. A few questioned the propriety of a widow entering a new relationship so soon after her husband's death. But such concerns were generally dismissed in a frontier town, where practical considerations often outweighed rigid social conventions. For Rebecca, the growing attachment brought unexpected joy and occasional moments of doubt. She had never imagined finding love again, particularly with a man so different from Edward. Where her late husband had been polished, ambitious, and sometimes superficial, Tate was straightforward, content with his place in life, and possessed a depth of character forged through hardship. "You're quiet tonight," Tate observed one evening as they sat in her cottage after supper. He had come to fix a leaking roof, staying afterward at her invitation to share the meal she had prepared. "Just thinking," she replied, setting aside her mending. "About how unexpected life can be." A year ago, I was facing destitution in Philadelphia, being told my life was essentially over. Now I'm here with meaningful work, a community that values me and, he prompted when she hesitated, and feelings for a man I never would have met if disaster hadn't forced me to leave everything behind. Tate took her hand. Do you ever regret it, coming here? Not for a moment, she said without hesitation. Though I sometimes wonder if I'm rushing into feelings I don't fully understand. It's been such a short time. Some things don't need years to be certain, Tate said. But I'm not rushing you, Rebecca. We have time. His patience and understanding only deepened her growing love for him. Here was a man who saw her fully not as a possession or ornament as Edward sometimes had, but as a partner, a whole person with her own strengths and value. As winter began to loosen its grip on the valley, Rebecca threw herself into preparations for the spring term. The school was flourishing under her guidance, with attendance more consistent even among the ranch children, thanks to the system she and Tate had developed for home study. One crisp March morning, she arrived at the schoolhouse to find a group of town council members waiting for her, including Reverend Collins and Mr. Jenkins, the clerk who had met her at the train station nearly a year before. "Good morning, gentlemen," she greeted them, a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all, Mrs. Northwood," Reverend Collins assured her. "Quite the contrary. We've come with a proposition for you." Inside, they explained their purpose. The town was growing rapidly, with several new families expected in the coming months. The school would soon be overcrowded with a single teacher. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position as head teacher," Mr. Jenkins explained, "with an assistant to be hired under your supervision. The salary would be increased accordingly, and we're prepared to build proper teacher accommodations adjacent to the expanded school." Rebecca was momentarily speechless. I'm honored by your confidence in me. You've transformed our school," Reverend Collins said. "The children are thriving and parents couldn't be more pleased. We want to ensure you remain in Jackson permanently." "I would need some time to consider," she said, though in her heart she already knew her answer. "Of course. The council meets again next week. We'd appreciate your decision by then." After they left, Rebecca stood in the empty schoolroom, overwhelmed by emotion. A permanent position, recognition of her work, a future in Jackson stretching before her, secure and filled with purpose. She was still absorbing the news when her students began arriving. The day passed in a blur of lessons and activities, her mind constantly returning to the council's offer and its implications for her future, for their future. She corrected herself, thinking of Tate. That evening, she called at the Mercantile after closing time, knowing Tate would be finalizing the day's accounts. He looked up from his ledger with a smile that warmed her from within. "This is a pleasant surprise," he said, coming around the counter to greet her. Rebecca shared the council's proposal, watching his reaction carefully. "It would mean committing to Jackson indefinitely," she concluded, "making this my permanent home." The joy that spread across his features told her everything she needed to know. "You're considering accepting?" "More than considering," she admitted. "But I wanted to discuss it with you first. This affects both of us, I think." Tate set aside his ledger and took both her hands in his. "Rebecca, nothing would make me happier than knowing you're staying in Jackson, that you're making a life here." "With you?" she asked softly. "If you'll have me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." From the pouch, he extracted a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Martha's been keeping it for me, said it should go to the woman who brought light back into my life." Rebecca's breath caught as he knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Rebecca Northwood, I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Tate rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't express. "When I came here," she said when they finally parted, "someone told me I was too old to start over. But here with you, I'm not starting over, we're starting together." "Together," he agreed, "and we're just beginning." News of their engagement spread quickly through the small town. Martha was ecstatic, immediately launching into plans for the wedding. The date was set for early June, when the valley would be in full bloom and before the busiest season for both the school and the mercantile. Spring arrived in earnest, transforming the landscape from white to vibrant green. Rebecca accepted the council's offer, working with them to design the expanded school and develop criteria for selecting her assistant. The plans called for construction to begin after the wedding, with the new facilities ready for the fall term. As the wedding day approached, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The devastation that had forced her from her home in Philadelphia now seemed like a blessing in disguise, the painful but necessary catalyst for finding true happiness. On the morning of her wedding, she stood in Martha's room above the mercantile, where tradition dictated she prepare separately from her groom. Her dress was simple but elegant ivory silk with delicate embroidery at the bodice, a gift from the ladies of Jackson who had worked secretly to create it. "You look radiant," Martha declared, adjusting the small wreath of wildflowers that crowned Rebecca's upswept hair. "My brother is a fortunate man. I'm the fortunate one," Rebecca replied, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. "To have found such love when I'd given up hope of it. Nonsense. You deserve every happiness." Martha squeezed her hand. "Now, are you ready to become Mrs. Paxton?" The ceremony took place in the churchyard, beneath an arch twined with spring flowers. The entire town turned out to witness the union of their schoolteacher and merchant. Rebecca's students formed an honor guard along the path, scattering flower petals as she walked toward Tate. He waited for her beneath the arch, his expression a mixture of awe and devotion that took her breath away. As she reached him, he took her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Collins began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The traditional words washed over them as they stood together, hands clasped, hearts united. When the time came for their vows, Tate spoke with a depth of emotion that moved everyone present. "Rebecca, when you came to Jackson, you brought with you a courage and determination that humbled me. You faced every challenge with grace and strength, never allowing others' doubts to define you. In you, I found not just love, but inspiration. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, and to cherish every day we're granted together." Rebecca blinked back tears as she responded, "Tate, you saw value in me when others saw only limitations. Your quiet strength and unwavering support gave me the foundation to rebuild my life. In you, I found not just a companion but a true partner. I promise to walk with you in trust and faith, to face life's joys and sorrows hand in hand, and to love you with all that I am for all our days. By the power vested in me," Reverend Collins concluded after they exchanged rings, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Paxton, you may kiss your bride." Cheers erupted as Tate gathered Rebecca into his arms, sealing their union with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Rebecca felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, with this man, in this community that had embraced her so completely. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables set up in the town square for a communal feast. There was dancing and laughter, speeches and well wishes, as the town celebrated not just a wedding but the union of two people who embodied the spirit of new beginnings that defined the frontier. As twilight descended, Tate and Rebecca slipped away from the festivities to the home they would now share, a comfortable house on the edge of town that Tate had purchased months earlier and renovated in secret as a wedding gift. "Welcome home, Mrs. Paxton," he said as he carried her over the threshold. Rebecca looked around in wonder at the thoughtfully furnished rooms. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with volumes from both their collections. A writing desk stood near the window, perfect for preparing lessons. Every detail reflected an understanding of her tastes and needs. "It's perfect," she whispered. "When did you manage all this?" "Been working on it since winter," he admitted. "Wanted to surprise you. You certainly succeeded." She explored the rooms, touching furniture and fixtures with delight. "I've never had a home that felt so completely mine." "Ours," he corrected gently, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Everything I have is yours now." She turned in his embrace to face him. "And everything I am is yours." Their kiss deepened, years of loneliness and loss giving way to the promise of shared tomorrows. In each other's arms, they found the beginning of a new chapter, one written together, page by page, day by day. 2 years later, Rebecca stood on the porch of their home, watching as Tate played with their daughter in the summer sunshine. Little Sarah Rose, named for both their mothers, had her father's blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair. At 10 months old, she was just learning to toddle, her chubby hands reaching for the wildflowers Tate was showing her. The expanded school had flourished under Rebecca's leadership. With a capable assistant teacher sharing the workload, she had been able to continue teaching through most of her pregnancy and returned several months after Sarah's birth. The townspeople had been supportive beyond measure, many of the mothers taking turns watching the baby when both Rebecca and Tate needed to work. Martha had moved to her own small house nearby after the wedding, insisting the newlyweds needed privacy. But she remained a constant presence in their lives, especially after Sarah's arrival, delighting in her role as doting aunt. Life wasn't without challenges. The harsh Wyoming winters tested their resilience every year. The growing town faced the inevitable conflicts of expansion, with newcomers sometimes clashing with established residents over resources and development. Tate had been elected to the town council the previous year, adding civic responsibilities to his already busy life as merchant and family man. But through it all, Rebecca and Tate faced each day together, their partnership stronger for the obstacles they overcame. They had built a life neither could have imagined before fate brought them together in Jackson. As Rebecca watched her husband and daughter, she thought about the words that had nearly prevented her from finding this happiness. Too old to start over. How wrong those Philadelphia matrons had been. Age hadn't limited her capacity for new beginnings, it had enriched it, bringing wisdom and perspective to every fresh challenge. Tate looked up, catching her watching them. His smile, still capable of quickening her pulse after 2 years of marriage, broadened as he lifted Sarah and carried her toward the porch. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" he asked, settling beside her on the porch swing, their daughter contentedly playing with the buttons on his shirt. "About beginnings," she replied, "and how they're possible at any age. Especially when you have the right partner," he added, taking her hand. Rebecca nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Especially then." In the distance, the school bell rang, marking the end of the day's lessons. Beyond it, the mountains stood sentinel as they had for millennia, witnesses to countless human stories unfolding in their shadow. Rebecca's story, their story was just one thread in the tapestry of the frontier, but it was beautiful and strong, woven with love, courage, and the unshakable belief that it's never too late to begin again. As the sun began its descent behind the Tetons, casting golden light across the valley they now called home, Rebecca turned her face up to Tate's for a kiss. In his eyes, she saw the same certainty she felt in her heart. They had indeed started together, and the journey ahead, whatever it might bring, was one they would travel side by side.